The moment I heard her say it, I almost didn't believe my own ears. I was standing in the entryway of the Harrington Grand, one of those hotel ballrooms with chandeliers that cost more than my truck. Still holding the gift bag my daughter-in-law's mother had told me to bring, because apparently showing up empty-handed to your own son's engagement dinner was a crime in their world. I had driven 3 hours from Denton, Texas. My boots were clean. My shirt was pressed. I'd even borrowed a sport coat from my neighbor Vic, who's about my size and owns one decent jacket he wears to church on Easter. I was trying. Lord knows I was trying. And then I heard her, my son's fiancée, talking to her mother maybe 8 feet away, her back half turned like that made it private. "Oh God," she said, in this low voice that somehow carried perfectly over the soft jazz. "He actually came in those boots." Her mother made a little sound, half laugh, half wince. "Marcus said he would." My son's fiancée continued. "I told him. I said, your father is going to walk in here smelling like an auto shop and embarrass us in front of everyone. And look, there he is." I stood there, 63 years old, and I stood there holding a gift bag with tissue paper sticking out the top, and I felt about 12. Let me back up, because this story doesn't start in a hotel ballroom. It starts 40 years ago in a garage. I'm Holt. Well, officially it's Robert Holton Ware, but everyone who knows me has called me Holt since I was about 9 years old. I grew up in Denton, Texas, third of 5 kids. My dad ran a small engine repair shop out of a converted barn on our property. Lawnmowers, generators, boat motors, the occasional tractor. We weren't poor, but we weren't comfortable either. We were the kind of family where every dollar you spent, you'd already thought about 3 times. I started working in that shop when I was 11. Not because my dad made me, because I wanted to. There was something about the logic of a machine, the way every problem had a cause, and every cause had a solution, and if you were patient enough and honest enough about what you were seeing, you could fix almost anything. That idea has basically governed my entire life. By the time I was 25, I had my own shop. Nothing fancy, a 3-bay garage on the edge of town, used equipment, a hand-painted sign. I specialized in diesel engine work, which in that part of Texas meant I was never short of business. Farmers, contractors, trucking companies. I built relationships the old way. Show up. Do what you said you'd do. Don't overcharge. My wife, Sandra, we called her Sandy. She kept the books for the first 12 years. She had a gift for numbers that I've always been grateful for, because I'm good with engines and terrible with spreadsheets. We had our son Marcus in 1991 and our daughter Leah 3 years later. Sandy died of ovarian cancer in 2011, which is the worst thing that's ever happened to me, and I won't say much more than that, because some grief you just carry and don't put on display. After Sandy passed, I threw myself back into the work. Marcus was 20 by then, already at UT Austin studying finance. Leah was 17. I kept the shop running, expanded a little, hired 4 full-time mechanics, nothing dramatic. Just steady work, year after year. What most people didn't know, what I didn't advertise, was that over about a 15-year period, I'd quietly developed something. A modified fuel injection calibration system for older diesel engines. I'd been tinkering with it for years, just trying to solve a problem I kept seeing in the field. Eventually I got it to work reliably, documented everything, and in 2009 I filed for a patent. My attorney at the time, a woman named Diane Cocker, who I'd trusted for 20 years, helped me structure it properly. That patent got licensed to 3 regional agricultural equipment companies, then a larger manufacturer. Then, in 2019, a company out of Ohio made an offer to buy the intellectual property outright. I declined. The annual licensing revenue by that point was substantial. Not Silicon Valley substantial, but real, quiet, country Texas substantial. I didn't talk about it. That's not who I am. I drove the same truck, I wore the same boots, I ate lunch at the same diner on Thursdays. Marcus knew vaguely that I had some investments. He didn't know the details. That was my choice. My son met Brittany at some rooftop event in Dallas. She was 28, worked in marketing for a luxury real estate firm, and was, from the pictures Marcus showed me, genuinely beautiful in that very put-together, never a hair out of place way. Her parents, her father Clifton and her mother Diane, ran what Marcus described as a private equity firm focused on hospitality assets, which I eventually understood meant they bought hotels and resorts and sold them for profit. They were Houston money, old enough to feel confident about it. Marcus called me on a Tuesday evening in March, nervous in a way I hadn't heard since he was a teenager who'd wrecked my truck. "Dad," he said, "I need to tell you something." He told me he was going to ask Brittany to marry him, that he loved her, that he hoped I'd be happy. I was happy. Of course I was happy. He's my son. "When do I get to meet her?" I asked. "That's the thing," he said. "Her parents want to do a formal dinner, like an engagement party kind of thing, at the Harrington Grand in Dallas." I said that was fine. "Dad," he paused, "Brittany's family they're kind of formal. Just, be yourself, but maybe what, Marcus?" Another pause. "Maybe dress up a little." I told him I understood. I borrowed Vic's jacket. I polished my boots until I could see my reflection in the toe. I bought a gift, a crystal serving set from a department store in Denton, wrapped by the girl at the counter, because I am not a man who wraps gifts well. I drove 3 hours. I parked. I walked into the Harrington Grand, and 8 seconds later I was standing in the entryway hearing my future daughter-in-law describe me as a man who smells like an auto shop. Here's what I did. I did nothing. I adjusted the gift bag in my hand. I walked forward her. I smiled when Brittany turned and saw me, and I watched her face go from caught out to bright and gracious in about half a second. She was good at that, I'll say. She hugged me and said how wonderful it was to finally meet me. Her perfume smelled like money. Her parents were at a high-top table near the bar. Clifton was a tall man, silver-haired, the kind of handsome that gets more distinguished with age. He had on a blazer that probably cost $1,200. He shook my hand, and his grip was the kind that's trying to communicate something. His wife Diane had that particular kind of smile that's performing warmth rather than feeling it. "So," Clifton said, after about 4 minutes of pleasantries, "Marcus tells us you run a repair shop." "I do," I said. "Diesel engines, mostly, in Denton." He said it like he was confirming something he'd suspected. "Born and raised." He nodded slowly, the way people nod when they've already filed you in a folder and the conversation is just formality. "That's good, honest work," he said, which is one of those things people say when they mean the opposite of what they're saying. Marcus was across the room talking to Brittany's brother. Leah hadn't been able to make it. She lives in Raleigh now, just had her second baby 2 months ago, and the timing was bad. So it was just me with Clifton and Diane, and 2 of Brittany's friends who smiled at me politely and then looked at their phones. Dinner was a 4-course affair. I sat across from Clifton. He talked about a resort acquisition in Scottsdale. He mentioned golf 3 times. He asked me if I followed the market, and I said I kept an eye on it, and he made a sound that I would describe as tolerant. Somewhere between the salad course and the entree, Brittany's mother leaned toward me and said, "Marcus has been such a wonderful addition to our world. He fits right in," and the word addition hung there for a moment in the air between us. After dessert, Clifton asked Marcus to step away with him for a moment. I watched them from across the room. My son nodded several times. His posture got a little stiff. They shook hands, which I found strange. When Marcus came back to the table, he was quieter. The drive home that night was long. I had the radio off, just highway and headlights. Marcus called me the next morning. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something Clifton brought up." He explained it carefully, the way he does when he's rehearsed what he wants to say. Clifton, apparently, was in the middle of a resort acquisition that required a capital partner. He was offering Marcus, meaning he was really offering me, since Marcus doesn't have that kind of capital, an opportunity to invest. "The minimum," Marcus said, and then he paused. "The minimum was $750,000. I was quiet for a moment. "He said it's a strong opportunity," Marcus continued. 20% projected return over 3 years. "It's a Sedona property." "Marcus," I said, "when exactly did your girlfriend's father ask you to bring investors to the table? Before or after he asked you to marry his daughter?" A long silence. "He said it's how they do things," Marcus said. "Family investments. He said it shows commitment to the family's success." I felt something go cold in my chest. Not anger exactly, more like clarity. Son, I said, I'm going to ask you something and I want you to answer me honestly. Does Brittany know about this conversation? He didn't answer immediately. That was its own answer. I need to think, I told him. Give me a few days. I hung up and sat at my kitchen table for a long time. What happened next took about 3 weeks. I called Diane Cocker, my attorney. I had her run a quiet background check on Clifton's investment company. Not anything aggressive, just public records, filing history, any litigation. What came back was interesting. 2 of his previous resort projects had resulted in investor lawsuits. One had settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. The other had been dismissed on a technicality, but the allegations in the filing, misrepresentation of projected returns, commingling of funds, were detailed and specific. I didn't say anything to Marcus yet. I wanted to be sure. I also, during this time, had one phone call with Brittany. She reached out, said she'd heard I was thinking things over and wanted to clear the air. She was warm on the phone, genuinely charming. She said her father gets excited about finding good partners and that the offer was really just his way of welcoming you into the family. She laughed lightly. He does it with everyone, she said. It's a compliment, honestly. I said I'd keep that in mind. 2 days later, Marcus called to tell me Clifton had moved the timeline up. He needed an answer within the week. The deal was moving fast. That evening I drove to Dallas. I didn't call ahead. I went to the restaurant where Marcus and Brittany liked to have Sunday dinner. He'd mentioned it once, a place in Uptown, and I waited at the bar. When they walked in around 7, Marcus stopped dead when he saw me. I said I just wanted to talk. The 3 of us sat at a corner table. I put a folder on the table. In it were the documents Diane had pulled together, the litigation history, the dismissed lawsuit, the names of 2 people who had lost money in Clifton's previous deals. Brittany's face went through several expressions in quick succession. Where did you get this? She asked. Public records, I said. Anyone could find it. My father's business is. I'm not making an accusation, I said. I'm making an observation, and I'm telling my son that I won't be investing in this project. Not because I can't, because I choose not to. Marcus was very still. Dad, he said quietly, what do you mean? Not because you can't? And there it was. The moment I'd been putting off for 20 years, not because I was ashamed of what I'd built, but because I'd never needed anyone to know. My identity was never tied to the number in an account. I fixed engines. That's who I am. But Marcus was sitting there, about to make a decision that could cost him a great deal more than money, and he deserved to understand the full picture. I told him about the patent. I told him about the licensing agreements. I told him the numbers, the real numbers, not estimates. I watched his eyes change. Brittany was very quiet. You have, Marcus started. More than your future father-in-law has asked me to invest, I said. Considerably more. But that's not the point. The point is that a man who does real business doesn't pressure a fiancé to extract capital from his father within 48 hours of meeting him. I drove home that night, not sure what would happen next. I've been a father long enough to know you can't make decisions for your kids, no matter how old they get. You can show them the truth and then you have to let go. What happened over the next 2 months was not clean or simple. There were arguments I didn't witness. Marcus told me later that Brittany had defended her father at first, then grown quiet, then started asking questions of her own. About the timeline, about who had known what and when. Apparently, she was not entirely shocked by what I'd found. Apparently, there'd been other family investment opportunities in her past that had also moved very fast. Marcus broke off the engagement in June. He called me on a Sunday morning to tell me. He wasn't angry. He was tired and sad in that specific way of a person who's had to grieve something while it was still standing in front of them. I should have asked more questions earlier, he said. You asked them when you needed to, I told him. We talked for a long time that morning, about his mother, about the shop, about the patent which he still had questions about, and which I tried to explain as simply as I could. About what he wanted his life to look like. He's 32 years old and smart in ways I'm not, and I told him that. At some point he said, Dad, why didn't you ever say anything about the business side of things? I had to think about how to answer that. Because it wasn't relevant, I finally said. It's not who I am. I'm a guy from Denton who fixes engines. That's the truth. The rest of it is just numbers. The boots, he said. What about them? I used to be a little embarrassed, he admitted. When I was younger, you'd come to school events and you'd have grease under your fingernails even when you'd scrubbed them. I didn't understand then. I didn't say anything. I understand now, he said. I still drive the same truck. It's a 2014 F250, and it runs perfectly because I maintain it myself. I still eat lunch at the same diner on Thursdays, where a woman named Carol has been taking my order for 11 years and knows I want decaf after noon. I still wear the same boots. They're Lucchese, which my wife Sandy gave me for our 20th anniversary. And they are worn in exactly the right way, which is the way of a man who has actually walked somewhere in his shoes. Last Thanksgiving, Marcus drove up from Dallas. He brought a woman he'd been seeing, someone he worked with, a quiet accountant who asked sensible questions and helped clear the dishes without being asked. I didn't say anything about that. I just noticed. After dinner, the two of us sat on the porch while it got dark. He asked me about at the shop. I told him we'd just brought on a new mechanic, a kid from the community college diesel program who had good hands and a good attitude. Marcus laughed and said that sounded exactly like what I'd say. It's exactly what matters, I told him. He looked out at the yard for a while. The sky was clear the way it gets in November in North Texas, stars coming in early. I'm proud of you, Dad, he said. It came out a little rough, like he'd been holding it a while. I put my hand on his shoulder. I know, son. We sat there until the cold got too serious to ignore, and then we went inside. Some things don't need more than that.